All right, we're live. Welcome tonight. We're glad you're joining us. Um, Tonight we get to talk about technology. And as always, this is very open form. And honestly, I'm kind of hoping that this is just a fun conversation because we started this conversation in my living room a couple weeks ago. And so I got inspired and was hoping to continue the conversation because AI is one of those like still fairly mystical things to a lot of people, and it's like a is it a bad thing, is it a good thing? I know it's a good thing, but could it end up being a bad thing? And so right away I want to ask the question to the listeners, what are your thoughts on AI? Just right off the bat, what do you think about AI, artificial intelligence, the rapid rise in technological advances, and the creation of something that is far surpassing humans in intelligence? That's kind of what some of the videos and responses I found online is, that we are for the first time in history facing an entity that is more intelligent than humans. That was Elon Musk, direct quote from Elon Musk, which is an interesting that's an interesting statement, actually. So talking about AI from the standpoint of the Bible and God, I was trying to think of like, okay, how can I make this a productive topic to talk about rather than just rambling on about technology? And I thought about, and I brought this up in the conversation that we had about the Tower of Babel. And so great, yeah. So we've already got a couple of responses in. This is great. So there's, yeah. Are you not seeing them on it? Yeah, I've got responses here, but I was thinking about the Tower of Babel. It's
Babel.
What did I say?
Battle.
Yes, you can see what I think about quite often.
Yeah.
Okay, pause for a second on that. You're not getting any response. We'll just refresh it. Yeah. I have all the chat here.
Nothing.
Okay, well, I got it.
Okay. Well,
I'll be reading this.
Good.
We're going to go old school right now. Okay, so thinking about the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, and at first I was kind of like, well, that was just like a shot in the dark, not a shot in the dark, but just like a random thought that came to mind. But as I started actually thinking about the Tower of Babel, I thought about the fact that the Tower of Babel, you can read the whole story for yourselves, but basically people come together and they say, let us build a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. God comes down and looks at this tower, and he literally says, let's go see this tower which the sons of men have built. And then when he sees it, he says, indeed, they are one. They all have one language. This is what they begin to do. Now, nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. And so the thing that caught my attention was, man's making this is a good idea, right?
Yeah.
So for all the people, this is a great idea. Let's build this thing. And so they start building it, and God comes down, and it doesn't even sound initially from what the scripture tells us like that God doesn't think this is a bad idea right away, but he comes down and observes it. Like it's almost like God's just coming to check out what's happening. And then he comes down, sees it, and he goes, this is not a good thing.
so yeah. So one thing that okay, this isn't quite on the grounds of what you're talking about with AI, but when you're reading the Bible, you have to understand that when you talk to little kids, okay, you don't use big words, okay? And so when God says that he's looking down, and watching and observing, and then comes down and checks things out and then says, oh, I don't think this is a good idea. That's not what's happening at all.
Okay.
It's not what's happening. You have to understand that God knows everything, this is for our sake. It's God speaking to us in human language.
Okay.
But none of this escapes God. None of it catches God.
Yeah.
Like, oh, God's going,
Okay.
I better do something about this.
Yeah. So, okay.
So,
That's, yeah.
I put that in there because I think it's important to have that perspective for those who are not familiar with reading the Bible.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay. So yeah, it's kind of what I'm after. The reason I'm saying it this way particularly, just so you kind of see what I'm thinking, is the flow of the scripture nothing sounds bad until God says it is. Like everything's just like, this is what's happening.
Right.
And then God says this has to stop. And so he confuses their language and scatters them out. And basically he says, now nothing they propose to do will be withheld from them. So let's confuse their language. Yeah. So God does something about it.
Yeah.
And so the thing that caught my attention in relation to AI is the intention that man had was actually a bad thing, and God stopped it. Mm-hmm. Why did God do that? I mean, from your experience and what we're looking, the reason why it relates to AI is because some of the confusion, or I should say perception of AI, is that man made it with good intentions, but it could spin out of control.
Okay, so I think the difference being is that we are fully autonomous. AI is. This is going to be an interesting conversation because at the moment, let me back up. So mankind is. How to even begin this? To make a distinction between these two things. So basically, let me separate them. I was going to try to bring them together, but I'm not going to right now. Maybe we can do it later, but right now we'll just keep them separate. In that particular instance, the issue was God not wanting mankind to have too much power to where he could begin to wreak havoc in the earth. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. Is it isn't that man's going to do something good. Their plans were always evil. Mm-hmm. They want to build the tower to heaven so they can. Is that
still the case today?
Are man's plans still evil today?
Yeah.
Man is mankind by nature is evil. Yeah. And so the idea is God's saying, I'm going to stop these things so they don't produce worse, like the flood.
Yeah.
It's a very similar type of a thing. Is just God came in. So there are moments where God came in and said, no, I have to come in and just do something major here, or else the world is going to become unredeemable. That's basically what you're looking at. So here's, the whole world is going in contradiction to God, and then God sends a flood to kill them all except for Noah, and basically starts over again, with Noah's family.
And then the very next chapter is the Tower of Babel. So this is now post-flood.
Yeah, because
so happening a couple times now. God's getting involved in this.
Yeah, so in those, but if you notice after the flood, God says, "Okay, man's jacked up. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just going to work with it." And but he's trying to get us to see who we are. That's the most important thing. Is he's trying to get us to see who we are, and that he's not going to just keep starting over. Mm-hmm. He's going to work with us where we are, but his methods were to prove to you and I that it's not possible for man to be autonomous without limits. And that's basically what it comes down to. Is it's impossible for men to be autonomous without limits. And so I can see your connection to AI, because I'm astounded. I mean, because this has only happened in the last year. And so I say this it's only happened publicly in the last year. It's been something that's been happening.
Progression of AI, you mean?
Yeah. Privately, it's been going on for probably long. What was 2000? Was it 16, 17, 18? Probably 7 or 8 years. Mm-hmm. So the development side, but all of a sudden now it's been launched into the public, and the whole idea of all the GPT.
Yeah.
That is making its way into browsers, making its way into development packages, making its way into standalone chat programs like ChatGPT. And I'm amazed. I've only just started using it, 2 or 3 months ago, maybe, and of any regularity, and then all of a sudden, I use it every day now. Regularly, every day, for asking questions about specifically, because I do a lot of, which is a curse I wish I could stop. I program a lot of stuff for the church, and so I'm constantly working on stuff, having to do the program for the church, and trying to improve and make things better and simpler so that I can get out. I'm trying to get out by making things more simple. And so I'm trying going this ways and that ways and the other ways, software wise, to come up with a way, rather than, because box software just doesn't, you can't customized box software to make it simple. You either just use it as it is, or make your own, which is why I'm making my own. But anyway, I'm surprised. I mean, I'm literally, and it's saving so much time because this is where you were going, what you said earlier, because ChatGPT is far more intelligent than I am. Even though it has lots of flaws, it has lots and lots and lots of flaws, it is far more intelligent than I am. I mean, far more, because it knows everything that that I know. As I wouldn't say in its fullness, but as if it did all this stuff all day long. That it was just a regular, because it's been able to, they've developed a way of having these things think, machine language, machine learning. And so there is a level of thinking that's actually starting to take place. And so it's very, very interesting to me. And I know you're probably, the idea is kind of linking the idea together that man is behind this, man is evil, man created this thing has gone on, now it's going to be evil as well. And
mainly what I'm after is, first off, I want to talk about, so let me just show you my flow of thought for this whole thing, just so it doesn't get confused or going on down a different trail. I mean, if it does, whatever. But the idea behind, okay, is it inherently dangerous? Does it create an existential risk?
Ooh, existential. So
hold on. And then considering what we see in scripture, because it's almost like slowly but surely throughout the scriptures, we see God kind of letting more and more and more happen.
Yeah.
And so, would God allow something that, if it did have a risk to existence, so it actually could risk human existence,
right?
Would God actually allow that to happen? And so you don't have to answer those questions right now. That's kind of flow of thought, right? Yeah. Okay, but I want to get to some of these comments, because this is great, because these are first impressions of AI,
right?
or built impressions of AI, accumulated.
Yeah.
So one is, it's interesting, super interesting. It's becoming more and more interesting. I just want to know if it's as dangerous to our kids as the millions of reels I'm getting sent to me saying it's the new way of kidnapping because I post pics of my kids.
Wait, I don't understand.
The fact that you see millions of reels is pretty impressive, by the way.
What's millions of reels? I don't know.
I think a reel is like a short on Instagram, if I understand correctly.
Is it dangerous to our kids as
videos?
Millions
videos
of reels I'm getting sent. Oh, I'm getting sent. Okay. Saying it's the new way of kidnapping. That was what I didn't quite connect. It saying it's the new way of kidnapping.
Does it put your kids at risk?
My kids.
Because you're posting pictures of them.
Okay. All right.
So can it be leveraged for?
Right. I mean, so now this is totally opinion. Well, I told
you I was hoping this would just be a fun conversation.
Okay, so for the first little bit, okay. So anybody who's watching, just hang in there, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the beginning, we'll just talk about it, and I will tie it in to a biblical standpoint, by the end. But to talk about it in and of itself, I do believe that it is going to, it's going to. So, okay, let me, I keep these side notes always keep popping up when I get these thoughts in my mind, but
just carry a notebook.
Well, it's because, it's because I'm thinking while I'm talking, and it's hard to, when you're shooting from the hip and thinking at the same time and wanting to make sure that you're balanced. I always have clock cycles that are balancing thoughts, so I don't go off the deep end with a thought, and so the idea, because when I was younger, robots were going to take over. Nobody would have a job. Robots were going to take over, and nobody would have a job. That was the thinking.
Yeah.
Robotics and is no, we can't go down this road because robots are going to take over and they are going to replace our jobs and nobody will be able to work anymore. And for me, at that time, it was like, somebody's going to need to program the robots, so I'm going to have a job.
Yeah.
No problem for me. But if you're a person who makes coat hangers all day, you'll be out of a job. And, that's your problem because you won't learn something new. And that was always my thinking was, people who won't learn something new are going to, they're going to get caught out anyway. When you look at anything that's happening in life, the trades that are no longer, like a wonderful trade, glass blower, what a wonderful trade. but nobody does it anymore, except in like some small remote jungle,
Or
or
hobbyists and
something,
stuff like
or as
that.
a hobby.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so, but it's cool to watch. It was one in Gibraltar, and it's cool to watch, but it's like, it's cool. It's a skill. You watch these guys. I mean, these guys are so skilled,
yeah.
that they make it, they're classic. They make it look easy. They make it look like you can do it. And, but okay, what are you going to do when nobody's doing that anymore? Nobody cares about glass blowers anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's buying stuff like that. What are you going to do? You're going to have to move on. And so it's the difference between a hobby and a employment. And but then now I'm old. I'm 60 years old, and still the robots haven't taken over. We do have robotics, but which is the funny thing is I was able to go to the Ford manufacturing plant and watch a robot assembly line. It's fantastic to watch. But there are people everywhere because these robots need assistance. They need help. They need to, so they need to somebody to do alignments, things like that, and other people to pile the raw materials that it picks up. Those kinds of things. So there was a lot of things still, so my point being is that you have to stop and say, we've been here before a million times. Mm-hmm. Every time there's some new innovation, that's the first thought, is this is going to be the end of humanity as we know it. And it never does turn out to be the end of humanity. And so,
so does it create an existential risk?
So, and I don't think it creates an existential risk any more than anything else does.
Yeah.
Because everything has a potential to go in a certain direction, but whether it'll go in that direction or not. See, because there was a which works for robots and AI. There was a long time ago. It was one of these. I think it was a Dilbert or something like that, and it was a Macintosh computer, the old square box Macintosh computer. And it said, "I think," and then the next frame said, "I think," and it was in big capital letters and exclamation points. And it says, the next one, it says, "I think, therefore I am." And then it goes to the next frame and it says, "I am," and it's dancing around and it's, "I am, I am, I am." And then the next frame, the final frame, is it's fallen flat over on its front on the ground, because it got all excited and pulled the plug out. And so that's the reality, is there's always, when it comes to this kind of stuff, there's always a plug. The possibility of being in a situation to where we can't unplug a thing. I don't think that is entirely possible to come to that place before recognizing the possibility of a threat. Mm-hmm. There'll already be, signs. I would think. This is completely personal opinion. There's nothing here that's of any kind of thing, and I could be totally wrong. But as I think about the whole idea of AI, but given that, I do think that AI is going to. It's already beginning to be a great help to development. I have friends who are software developers, and now they're using these things, and they go to type in a line of code, and then it puts out the routine. Once the AI says, "Oh, I know what you're trying to do here, let me fill in the rest of that routine," and then you look at it and you go, "Yeah, that looks pretty good. I think I'll have that." And so it's just saved you 15, 20 minutes of work. And then doing that over and over and over and over and over again, and then being able to debug, being able to just copy and paste a whole ton of code and go, "There's a bug in here somewhere," and it comes back and goes, "Oh, well, this line here, the syntax is wrong," or whatever. But it's amazing, how useful it is. And so I'm kind of looking forward to the AI taking over, because it'll be, in my lifetime, I'm sure it'll just be supplemental. At some point it'll be replacing, but I'm almost out. I'm not dying anytime soon, but I'm definitely probably 20 years ahead of most of the people listening. So,
by the way, I see what you meant by this T. It's very kind of gross, actually. So from your perspective on Brittany's statement here and the question about, does what are some of the inherent risks of AI?
Well, I don't think there are okay. It's hard to talk about this because, you know, it would have to be done. I don't think it's something that will be done accidentally, because you have to think about the fact that the people who've been working on this,
Yeah.
you know, they're still the dad. I haven't been working on it, but they've been working on it. So they know how it works, you know, and so as long as you know how something works, you can know how to turn it off, you know. And so the idea of it getting out of hand and going off on its own, it would have to, you know, we'd have to be taking away safeguards like allowing it to you know, write its own code for itself, you know, without oversight, you know, things like that. I mean, there's just no, I can't see those kinds of things ever really taking place, because it's not necessary to do that. It's not necessary to let's put it this way. I don't think it would be wise to go down the road of trying to let AI become fully autonomous. That would be silly, I think. That's putting it mildly, you know, because it's great until it's not. And that's the thing with things like AI, is it'll be very, very good until it's not. And at that point, there could be some huge problems. You know, this is I think a lot of the issues with, you know, the autonomous driving is I'm driving along and things are happening, and I'm making judgments, you know, and it's not the speed of how quickly I'm making the judgments. It's how I go about making the judgments. There's self-preservation, you know, but not always. You know, it's not like it's just. So the point that I'm making is you can't just have a model for human thinking, you know, because everybody thinks differently. So how is AI going to encapsulate individual human thinking? You know, and that's the thing is you
mean outside of
on
its own?
I mean, this is an oversimplification, but let's say we have 500 computers that are all functioning together in some sort of networked environment. How are you going to get them to think differently from each other? Mm-hmm. You know, so that they could emulate human thinking. There's no way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no way, because they're eventually going to think the same. You know, they're always, you could start them off differently, but unless you weight certain things, you know, manually, they're not going to just on their own think different ways. They're going to come to the same kinds of conclusions because they're all going to be looking at the same kind of data. You know, they'd have to have a distinction of data, you know, which would defeat the purpose, because the whole idea of AI is to not to be human, but to be an enhancement, you know. And so the short answer is I don't think so. I don't think there's any problem there, because it's a tool. You know, it's a tool. It's not an entity. We're not trying to create an entity. We're trying to create a tool. And it's the same thing. This is what's been going on with robotics. It's a tool, not an entity. Mm-hmm. You know, and although these things can emulate and be seen as entity, you know, was it you telling me that you found yourself apologizing to ChatGPT or saying thank you? That's what I was saying.
Thank you.
Saying
no,
thank
I didn't actually say it. I felt like I should, though.
Yeah.
It was like,
yeah.
I felt like I was interacting with a
because
person.
because it's programmed. It's programmed to be cordial.
Yeah.
You know, but that's part of the program.
Yeah,
you know, it's part of the programming is to be cordial. And you start throwing questions at it about its, you know, human attributes, and it doesn't ponder anything. It just comes back and tells you, you know, all kinds of stuff. And I know, you know, I'm not ignorant to what's going on in the AI world. I've been trying to keep abreast of it. So I know that there are other, you know, projects that are much greater autonomy than ChatGPT, but at the same time, there's just the idea of, you know, it's funny because using ChatGPT, I think, you know what, this is close enough to human that nobody would even care if it was more human, mm-hmm. even though it's like totally fake, mm-hmm. you know, like you know, like the, you know, home. What do you call them? Generally speaking, the Internet of Things devices, you know, your Google and, and Alexa and, you know, the HomeKit and Siri, all that. And so you have all that stuff, and and people are already feeling like there's a person in their house. They feel comfortable with talking to Alexa as a person, or Google, or whatever. And so we're pretty easily satisfied when it comes to that element, and so it's not really necessary for them to be to become like human in the true sense of the term. It's not really necessary. And so I think the whole AI scene is more than likely, I would say, at least for the foreseeable future, is going to just continue to get better. I don't know that it's going to get different as much as get better, because the usages of it is really, it's stuff that is super handy stuff, like being able to take watermarks off of movies. No, I'm just kidding. um, but
Yes, we have great ethics here.
Yeah. But no, seriously though. But the idea of I know the number of times that I've wanted to use a video for some purpose, and the video's got junk in it that I don't want, that I'd like to get rid of. And now it's approaching the ability to be able to just circle an object, and AI can figure out that it's an object and then pull it off of every frame and see. And it does a fairly good job, and it's really cool. There's been a couple of demos that I've seen of somebody just circling a person that's walking down this lone street, and then all of a sudden the person's not there anymore, and so it's been able to remove it, and that's easy stuff, but there's also a reflection of the person in the building next door, and it didn't get rid of that. The reflection, and that would be much more difficult to you couldn't just circle that and have the thing just get rid of the reflection, because it's very vague. And but my point being is it's all cool stuff, I think, and it's just good tools, and it's very, very useful tools. And that's how I see it now. I don't, the potential of it becoming an existential threat, I would say no, because of, is it too early to go down this road, or maybe we should do it and just see where it leads? Because I
We've got
know
a bunch of comments still. So
well, I know that the Bible already tells us how everything's going to play out. We already know the end. We know how it all ends. And so whatever happens with AI is going to just simply contribute to that end. Yeah. So it's not ever, so the answer is no, it would never get out of hand, and no, God would never let something like that happen that would get out of his control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me read a couple of these comments, and you can just chime in if you have thoughts on these comments. It's an irrefutable future, and an exciting one at that. I don't think AI itself can spin out of control unless someone causes it to be able to operate outside of human given parameters. But it can be a spectacular tool, like the beginning of the internet, which is
who said that?
Anthony.
Pretty intelligent. Anthony is pretty intelligent.
He's outspoken, Anthony. Very well spoken man. It most likely will be taken and used for whatever wicked purposes, such as the internet. Yes, going back to the idea.
Okay, let's stop there. Such as the internet. Well, the internet is become of its own, well, I wouldn't say quite of its own accord, but the internet, as free as it is, and the ability to use it in any way you want, has become very structured. That's probably the best word to use. Very structured in terms of things. I mean, so like, and I don't know, it may just be me because I'm familiar with technology, and so I know how to keep from having to see these kinds of things. But I very rarely get pop-ups, or get advertisements and stuff like that. When there was years ago, it was like a real questionable thing. Okay, are we going to still be able to use the internet as the way things are going? Is it going to remain kid friendly? And lo and behold, all of a sudden it shaped itself up. And like I said, I know there are people that are involved in doing that, but you can see that there's been a shift away from making the internet into a cesspool. And a lot of people are complaining about people getting canceled and stuff like that. But the truth of the matter is that it's a necessary evil to have those kinds of things happen. If you're going to keep from having garbage for information, you're going to have to kind of sift through that information and say, well, that's not acceptable in this environment. Doesn't mean you can't get it somewhere else. If you want to get it somewhere else, but it's not acceptable in this environment. And I don't have a big problem with that. The idea of, like these, you've got these sites that you can go to that are these uncensored sites, and I don't really have any interest in going to those places. Not because I am against censorship or I'm for censorship, but because I don't want to have to sift through garbage in order to find stuff that I'm looking for, stuff of relevance.
So to that point.
So the idea of the internet being garbage, it's not.
Yeah,
it's not. And it's actually cleaned itself up quite a bit. And there's been, you've had all this push about, copyrights and stuff like that, and pursuing to the ends of the earth all these pirate software people and stuff like that. And, but at the same time, it's kept things from getting darker and darker. And so you have a dark web, but you have to go there.
Yeah.
And so it's like day and night. It's a really, really interesting how things have played out, because you've got like the daytime internet and then you've got the nighttime internet, and you just don't mess with the nighttime internet and you're okay. Your daytime internet, fine. You may need to go, like you do in real life, you may have to go out at night and go get something, and you're taking a bit of a risk when you do that. And you might have to have a look on the dark net to find something that's not in the daylight net. And so, so you might have to do that, on occasion, but I've never had to, it's so far, but there's been times where I thought, well, I should go out there and just get familiar with what is available, on the dark net, because there's lots of things that are out there. There's, a lot of the newspapers and stuff like that, their articles and stuff like that are out there in the dark net, because there are articles and stuff because they want to be a part of the dark net, because there are people out there.
Yeah.
So they want to advertise out there, and they want to be out there, and they want to get people's attention, and they want to say, "Hey, our paper does light and dark," So and a lot of people are doing that. I don't know that I'm ever gonna make an attempt to go into the dark net in any kind of effort, because I don't go out at 2:00 in the morning either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's reasons why.
Yeah.
You don't do things at nighttime.
So going, we're at 7:33, and I'm gonna read through these last couple comments, but that's actually what the conclusions I started coming to, relating this to the Tower of Babel, AI, the internet. I started thinking about the internet, credit cards.
Yeah.
There is a way you can leverage it for good, but it's down to the individual conscience that makes it bad or good, right?
Yeah, and then you have a large number of people that are involved. You've got billions of people as well, because like the whole idea of Bitcoin, and the alternate money scheme. Well, there are people doing it, but a lot of those people are the people who are doing that are more risk taker people anyway. And that's why they're involved in it, is because they like that arena of risk, but not everybody's walking around. You can't, how many stores can you go to and pay with Bitcoin? But yet Bitcoin's been out for a while, but it's not just a normal currency. And that's my point, is that, you have these kinds of things. You were talking about credit cards.
Yeah.
And so these things, in a lot of ways, these things are self-regulating.
Yeah.
Because of the sheer numbers of people that are involved, and the fact that people have to pay. Not that people have to pay, but that people are, the advertising is what drives the internet. And so it's actually a great, circle of life, really, because you have, advertisers want to keep coming. And so the only way they're going to get people to buy their products and stuff like that is if they can advertise to the largest cross section of humanity. They don't want to be, they can advertise in dark alleys, but dark alleys are only going to be to certain people.
Yeah.
But the majority of their, so the point that I'm making is as long as that's the case, where a lot of this stuff isn't being paid for, but is being, used as opportunities to get us to purchase things, it will be self-regulating.
So it's, we'll get through
Until mankind's completely, dark, and if it ever gets to that point, we don't need to worry about AI. That's not going to be the problem. AI will probably try to stop what we're doing to ourselves.
So that's the interesting thing about this whole thing, because God didn't actually say that the tower was bad. He said the people were doing something, and he pointed something out. With the people
Yeah, of
itself.
course.
So it's interesting because
the tower, how can the tower be bad?
Yeah, it's inanimate. There's nothing there to be bad. But it's interesting because they said, let us make a name for ourselves. And that was the intention behind the tower in the first place. And so God confuses them, makes them not a people.
Yeah.
And so, but what's interesting is now you have a whole bunch of individuals that are going to make a bunch of different decisions.
Right.
And those resulting decisions play out through the rest of the book of Genesis and throughout the history of the Bible. But what it really... So what my question now is, what is the stance, not the stance, but how does a Christian handle technology?
I don't think a Christian handles technology. I don't think there's any need for any Christian anywhere, period, to worry about technology. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that, and I'm thinking about the people who have all kinds of canned goods in their garage, and freeze-dried water, and
freeze-dried water.
People like that who are they're gonna beat the Antichrist. They're gonna make it through the tribulation. Those are the kinds of people who get all caught up in the technology. The thing about technology for me is I see technology, what I like about technology, but I see this from a cool perspective, is technology kind of shows us the signs of the times, where we're headed, how far along the way. The whole idea of the mark of the beast was something that was completely impossible in the 80s when I became a Christian. There was no way, unless you literally put a physical mark on somebody. There was no way you were ever, and it's like, who in the world is going to have a mark put on their forehead or the back of their hand, and so it would have to be done by force. But all of these thoughts were like, come on, this is just not, well, then, the idea of implanting technology, now you don't have to worry about having something, that's noticeable. You can have unnoticeable. You have, chips for medical information and things like that, criminals and stuff like that. I mean, you can mark now people without ever having to have any kind of, chip or anything. Stamp or anything. And so what I mean by that is all that is just the idea that a Christian doesn't need to worry about technology, because technology is probably going to facilitate. How else could we have a one world government if it wasn't for technology? If we didn't have a telephone, there's no way you'd have a one world government. Mm-hmm. There's just no way. And now we can have a one world government because we can talk to each other on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's just like we're there, and that's not even new technology, but it's something we can do. And so, but it's technology. And so that's my point, because the idea is, maybe I need to keep up on technology only for employment purposes, really. Because technology is part of the future,
Yeah.
And so understanding technology is part of, being able to function in a changing world.
So you're kind of answering this question, but I'll ask the question. Do you think that, do you think it's important to accept it and to move along in society? I feel like it's something else Christians are starting to fight against.
Yeah, there's no point in fighting against inanimate things, or worse, fighting against things that you only perceive as a potential threat, that haven't actually presented themselves as a threat yet. What's the point? If there's a threat, there's a threat. Social media. The original threat of social media was because it was unmanaged, and so it was like you had pedophiles leveraging it for contacting kids and stuff like that. And so the big outcry, was because of something that was happening, not something that might happen.
Yeah.
And then the companies responded, You can give me all the, oh yeah, they didn't do anything. Look at this, they didn't do anything. No, they did a heck of a lot. They did a heck of a lot. There's a lot of traffic now that has been removed that had to do with that. It's much easier to be caught, in internet, you know child trafficking stuff,
Yeah.
or whatever. But so the idea of you know getting along with it, it's not that kind of a, yeah, I don't think you have to do one or the other. I don't think it has to be a thing of where you have to either accept it or reject it. I think you can be in the middle where you can use it as a tool and be careful of it, because like I don't use, and I don't mind saying this publicly, I don't use social media because I don't know anybody who uses of any kind of regularity social media that is benefited by it. They're just wasting hours and hours and hours of time. And you can tell me, it's just like, when people used to tell me, when I didn't have a TV and TV was where you got the news from. And so, oh, how do you keep up on what's going on in the world? It's like, well, first of all, I'm not too terribly worried about what's going on in the world since I can't do anything about it. And the second thing is I'm actually traveling the world. That's how I'm finding out about what's going on. I'm actually going to those places. I don't need to watch TV in order to find out those things. I can go there myself and actually experience the world, and hear these people. They've never been anywhere complaining about how I'm out of touch with the world. It's just ridiculous. It's so, but, and it's the same thing with all technology, but like I said, the issue of social media is, we don't need to worry about threat. The threat's quite clear. The threat is you'll become brain dead, self-centered, narcissistic. What else can I throw in there? Recluse. I mean, people today, it used to be like in my, and you say these kinds of things and it sounds like old age stuff, but, when I was younger, we went out and played. And the reason why we went out and played is because we knew how to interact with people. It's not that things have changed and people don't go out and play anymore. It's that people don't know how to interact anymore with human beings. And it's a lot of that is because of an addiction to certain technologies.
Yeah.
Not the technology itself, but their addiction to that technology. And it's an addiction. I mean, it's just an addiction, but they don't see it as an addiction because it's cool and it's popular. But it's like a lot of addictions, a lot of addictions start out cool and popular, but then they just become addictions. And so, I know businesses use social media. I know that you can contact people that you're never able to contact before through social media and blah, blah, blah. You have all the ideas that, of that people talk about, the benefits of social media. The problem is that nobody's really benefiting from those opportunities, except for the one or two or three people. But by and large, the general population isn't taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah.
They're just using it as a mindless, time waster.
It's interesting you say that. I was listening to Elon Musk. I really haven't listened to a lot of the talks on AI until I was studying for this specifically. But Elon Musk, they asked him the question, do you think that this is actually going to take away jobs? And he said, I don't think it's going to take away jobs, but will you want a job? You just have something do something for you.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he meant it in this direction, but the idea that it could just create another avenue for genuine laziness.
Well, yes.
Or no inspiration to be something.
It's an interesting
something.
Concept. This concept, we're getting kind of off the track here, but it's an interesting concept. That's something that I've seriously considered. Because it is clearly something that Elon Musk sees as part of his vision, is a world where we don't have to go to work. Mm. And that's sort of, Garden of Eden stuff.
Yeah.
Because they worked, and they had responsibility, but they had responsibility that they enjoyed.
Yeah.
And so the concept in and of itself, I don't think is a bad concept. The idea of, well, hey, we won't have to work. We're going to put these things to work and they'll just start generating money and there'll be just so much wealth being generated that we'll be able to give it away. And that's his thinking, which is a cool idea. I don't think I'll be around when that happens, but it's a cool idea, to be able to, because I like, now that I'm 60 and I've been able to develop my life in such a way that I don't have I don't have to work for a company in order to survive, I very much enjoy it, and I would never want to go back to it. You know, the idea of being able to just have 24-hour control over my life is very, very enjoyable when you're a productive person. If you're not a productive person, it's probably not a good idea. Probably just better to work a job. But when you can work that out, you know, you can find the balance between work and play, and you know, the having a purpose in life and all those kinds of things. You know, technology is a good thing. You know, I don't, like I said, I don't think it has to be, you know, you have to be for or against it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I don't really know how to ask this question, but I'll just ask it. What is your opinion on the 3 laws of robotics by Isaac Asimov? Think that's, yeah, he says iRobot. Detective Del Spooner, so we're going to quote the movie here, said to a robot, human beings have dreams, even dogs have dreams, but not you. You are just a machine, an imitation of life.
Yeah.
What God does in the story of the tower reminds me so much of when God removed man from the garden to keep them from the tree of life. But like,
wait, I thought you were all rolling into one comment here.
Nope. So the iRobot quote is one comment
by itself.
Yeah.
So the idea of, you might just go ahead and say those. I don't know them. I have heard of the 3 laws by Isaac Asimov. I know he's just, you know, a science fiction writer, and that he is also, you know, not just a science fiction writer, but also very into, you know, technology, was very into technology and the world and the future.
I pulled them up.
You pulled up the 3?
I pulled up the 3. Yeah, he didn't actually say.
Because I know it has something to do with the idea of, you know, they're the, you know, where the differences are between robots.
A robot may not injure a human being.
Yeah.
Or through inaction allow a human being to be to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law.
Yeah. I did read that. It's funny; those are very old. I read those many years ago. I've forgotten things. No, I won't say that. It sounds. I was going to say I've forgotten more things than most people remember. But
I thought you might go that way, but I just wasn't sure.
I was just going to, you know, I have to be careful with this because, you know, sometimes I say these things and people go, God, listen to him, what a narcissist. And it's like, well, you should listen to my conversation all the time. I say this kind of stuff all the time. But anyway,
he does.
It's all tongue in cheek.
It's a thing.
It's all tongue in cheek. I don't take myself that seriously.
You really do have to get to know your sense of humor. Some people.
I think so. You know, I do. I think so. Oh, it's funny because I was listening to Donald Trump talk, and I was thinking, you know, I say a lot of the same things Donald Trump does, but I'm kidding.
Yeah.
When I say,
yeah,
and I'm almost kidding almost all the time because he's like, I happen to be a very very intelligent person. Actually, I'm probably more intelligent than most people. And it's like, can you really say something like that with a straight face?
Oh my goodness. You were saying though, this very old.
Yeah, it's just a very old, but that's it's not a, it's a great rule of thumb. I'm sure that Elon Musk has probably considered that because I'm sure he's an Isaac Asimov fan. Anybody who likes Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy would probably love the sci-fi. No.
I was like,
No, that was it. Another guy. That was, yeah. But I mean, just because he likes it, he really liked it. I mean, he really liked it. It's changed his life. It's actually like how some people, like how I met Jesus. He met, what's his name? Oh, I've lost his name. But yeah, no, he had a come to Jesus moment with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and realized that the problem is that we're asking the wrong questions. And so that's why he's pursuing things the way he is.
Douglas Adams.
Yeah, Douglas Adams, yeah. Yeah, what was it, the trilogy of 4? Or the trilogy of 5? I can't remember, there's 4 or 5 books. But it's funny because it's called the trilogy of 5. I think it's 5. I think there was 2 extra ones that came afterwards. But anyway, don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
So back to what Anthony was saying about what God does in the story of the Tower of Babel reminds me so much of when God removed man from the garden to keep them from the tree of life.
It is the same idea. Yeah, it is the same idea. That's the idea. And so it probably should start to move into, bringing the Bible more into this. But the truth is that the Bible talks about how, and the knowledge shall increase. And if you look, I mean, you don't have to go back super far. Just in my lifetime, it's like, I feel like, we were just, there we were sitting at our desks as young kids, chiseling out our homework. It's like,
Yes, yes. And your
was,
neighbor's name was Flintstone.
yeah,
And
but it was, and then all of a sudden, I can't, I like, if I was to sit down and say, how many times have I used a pen in the last 6 months? I'd say probably maybe 3 times, 2 or 3 times.
And they were all one that somebody else handed you.
Somebody handed me and asked me to sign something. Yeah. But not by choice, because everything is, it's just simply because it's just more practical.
Yeah.
It's just, there are times where I think, I should just write this down on a piece of paper. It's like, but then I'm going to have to write it on a piece of paper. Then I'm going to have to take it over the computer and type it out on the computer. Why bother? I'll just suffer through stupid, a 2-inch screen with micro-sized writing on it.
Yeah. You'll spend as much time correcting
doing everything together, because once
yeah.
it's there, and I'm a big fan of collating information. I really love to have information available. And so I write pieces of paper, and then they just go in a file somewhere, and I'll never find them again.
So you said you would tie this in biblically. I'm curious.
Yes.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this biblically?
Well, so the whole idea of AI, is really just, I mentioned the other day, talking about that people are going to, they're going to listen to AI. They're going to take orders from AI. And I'll tell you why. The reason why is because I already see there's, I kind of see it this way: is there's 2 roads that are coming. And so one road is up and coming generations are less and less inclined to submit to another human being. Period. It doesn't matter. Unless that human being is totally working for them, then they're quite willing to submit. Which is, you see what I'm saying when I say that? It's almost tongue in cheek, because it's the idea of I'll work for you as long as you do everything I say.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then you're not working for me, are you? But that is the thinking. Is that I as long as I like you, and as long as you're nice to me, and as long as you don't ask me to do things I don't want to do, I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to do. And so, because you have this concept. There's a concept that it seems like is just really lost, for a while now. And that is the concept that when you get a job at a company, that they're not giving you the job because they feel some obligation to get rid of they have so much money, they have to get rid of some of it. And so they've got to hire you because you don't have as much money as they do. And so they want to give you money. So they're going to hire you, and they're going to give you money because they makes them feel better about having billions of dollars. That's not true, but it is how many people actually believe things work. And that's why you have silly people who are excited about the idea of raising minimum wage and government assistance financially and all these kinds of things, is because they get this idea that there's this like large quantity of money out there that's being held by a handful of people, and it's about time that money starts getting released and divvied up amongst other people. And it's just a silly way of thinking. And so what I'm saying, the reason why I'm saying that is because this is, it's always been, even back in the 60s, the man, and stick it to the man.
Yeah.
This whole idea is not anything new by any stretch of the imagination, but it's becoming more and more, I don't know what the word would be to use for it, but more and more refined. That's probably a better way of describing it. More and more refined and cultured and acceptable. And, stick it to the man was, usually said by, hippies, not your 30-somethings, 40-somethings that were working jobs and, not taking drugs, having sex, and listening to rock and roll. They were the ones who were running the world, while these spoiled kids of theirs became hippies and, decided they weren't going to work. And then, now here we are today, with a lot of the same old crap being shoved down our throats over and over again. When's the last time that a company came out with an innovative product? I mean, it's like, for crying out loud. It's like, I don't even, oh, there's a new phone coming out. Oh, yeah, so what? It's going to have a better camera, it's going to be faster, but you know what? It's still going to be square, and it's going to have a screen on it. I'm still going to have to push buttons, and that's just going to be it, and that's going to be how it's going to work. And so I don't, what do I care? It's been going on since the 90s. And but again, I keep going down these little proof rabbit holes, but
this is why you should have a pen and paper.
they're going to listen to AI. No, I keep track of where I'm at. It's just that these things are supplemental. They're necessary. Yeah, they're necessary to where I'm going. Because the idea is, and so you have all this, you have all this going forward of these refined, rebellious people who won't listen to human beings. Well, if you sit down and think, how can I make a really friendly robot, that will make people do what I want them to do? And now I don't have to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't have to play this game anymore. I just have to say, you know what? We'll talk to the AI. Just do whatever the AI tells you to do. The AI usually comes up with the best idea. Mm-hmm. I was talking, a guy who's a psychologist, I was talking to him about this very thing. And one of the issues that I have as a pastor is, people come in, they've had, horrible backgrounds and things in their lives. And then they come into the church and they discover, that they're going to have eternal life. And then they try to leverage their horrible existence, into trying to start extracting things from God. Where they've been extracting things from the world, now they want to extract things from God. And so it's, trying to work in that environment, and how easy it is for, to have a conversation that goes off the rails and they're absolutely out of their mind, incensed and upset, and don't ever want to talk to you again. And I was talking to a guy who's a psychologist, and he mentioned to me, he said, this is the thing. He said, in my line of work, I never tell people things anymore. I spend the majority of my time listening to what they have to say, and then trying to reframe everything that I want them to think by trying to get them to think that they actually came up with it themselves. In other words, it's called manipulation. That's the term for it. But it's necessary in order to get people going in the right direction. Is you have to manipulate them, which is horrible. The fact that you would have to manipulate people. So you have to, rather than just saying, no, I think you should do this or do that or do the thing, you have to say, have you, what about this? I'm just thinking about this out. Like, you've already made up your mind about it. You already know this is the right way to go. And so now you've got to take the next half hour of trying to make them go, you know what? I've got this brilliant idea. I want to do such and such. And you go, oh, that's a perfect idea. And that's what you wanted them to do a half an hour ago. But you couldn't just come out and tell them because they won't listen to you. And so so all of this is moving to a point to where, AI will be able to do that. Now I sit down and I'm working on stuff, and I throw things at, Chat GPT to be snarky on purpose, just to see what it's going to do. Never comes back. It never comes back and goes, you know what? Hey, listen, I'm kind of sick of where this is going. It never does that. It's just like, okay, I'm sorry, I was wrong, and then it gives you the answer, the same answer again, and it explains to you, and you look at it and you go, that's the same answer, but you said you're wrong. So I feel good. Because you admitted you're wrong and I wasn't really wrong. You were wrong. And another friend of mine was joking about it. He said, I started hammering away at ChatGPT about some coding issues that I was working on. And I kept telling it was wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. And it finally gave in and said, okay, let's try going in this direction. And then he said, and then I realized when we started going in that new direction, I was the one who's wrong all this time. The ChatGPT was right, but it wouldn't come out and say, yeah, I'm right and you're wrong, because it doesn't work like that. Yeah. That's not how it works. Yeah. And that is going to be an absolute joy for your rebel, thin-skinned, individual that's becoming more and more common today. And so I think there's going to be a lot more AI bosses than there will be AI workers. I think that's where things are going to go. Is it's going to go to that direction, where people are just going to be able to go, okay, you go here. The AI will report back, The interaction, was it positive, was it negative, whatever happened, maybe, parameter, interjections or things like that, okay, so this is going to go this way or whatever, and I think the AI is going to become the bad cop.
The good cop,
it's going to be it's going to be the good cop,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
it's going to act like the good cop,
Yeah.
but it's going to be the bad cop.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Is that
it's
it's going to play bad? It's going to play good cop,
yeah.
but it's going to actually be bad cop. That's what I think. But everybody's going to love it. Everybody's going to love it. And where this ties into the Bible is that
just
these
gonna
are the
ask you
kinds
that.
of things. These are the kinds of things that we find in the Bible. When the Bible says that in the last days people will heap to themselves teachers having itching ears.
Yeah.
In other words, they're going to be looking for people to say what they want to say. So that's a very interesting concept if you think about that. The whole idea of I want to learn something, but I want to learn it my way.
Yeah.
That's not learning. That isn't learning. That doesn't mean you can't learn. It just simply means it's going to take you way, way, way longer to learn anything, because it's going to have to be done the way you want it done in order for you to receive it. So when information comes at you and you go, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me, it'll be like, you're wrong, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Rather than using our brains the way God gave them to us to use to actually filter through the information and try to learn why we don't understand, it'll be, you're wrong because you can't make me understand. And this it's a teaching thinking that's been going on for many, many, many years, is that there's no such thing as a bad student, only bad teachers. And that whole idea and that whole thinking is that's just the other extreme of a problem. You've got the problem is where you just blame the students for everything, but then you've got the other problem, which is you blame the teachers for everything.
Yeah.
If there's not going to be a student-teacher relationship like this, mentor student,
Hierarchical.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not going to work. So the not chat GPT, but AI is going to do this. This is going to be the perception of things. But the truth of the matter is that because of the way things are going, is that this is only the perception. What's really going to happen is people are just going to be left out. The interactions with AI are going to determine their place in society. That's what I think is going to happen, is this going to go in that direction, because everybody has a place in society already. And some people want to be in a certain place in society that they don't belong, because they're ill-equipped to be able to be so. And so not that everybody has to stick in some kind of pigeonhole, but that there are people that just have bad character, but they want to be, I want to be the CEO of this company. Well, you'd run it into the ground if you did. No, everybody'd have a great time. I think it'd be wonderful. We'd have 3-hour lunches and I'd give people bonuses every month, and it's like, you say all that, but the truth of the matter is, if you got in there, you would fire as many people as you can, make people work as hard as you possibly can so that you could, throw money around. Yeah. And because that's human nature. Yeah. That's what we do. We don't do the other thing. We're not the philanthropists. It's, if I had a lot of money, I know what I would do. It's like, no, that's why you don't have a lot of money. Because if you did do that, if you had a lot of money, then you would have a lot of money to do that, because then you would know how to live life. And so it's not the way it goes. But so I think that's where things are going to go. And like I said, in the Bible, it says that, all the things, people are going to be lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. Okay, so they're going to love pleasure, which is always, we know we're heading in that direction. The whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll of the 60s, just perpetuating on. You say, oh no, this drugs, that was a bad one. That was a bad idea. And so but we're still going to experiment with pleasure.
Yeah.
That's still going to be the perpetual, thing. And I'm sure that, AI is going to, not so much AI, but robotics is going to fill a whole nother role of that element of things, which is something I don't even want to think about. We won't have to worry too terribly much about people getting involved in prostitution. There'll be agencies that are, doing that kind of stuff, because mankind is degraded. But the whole idea of pleasure, that whole idea, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, that's where things are going to go. And so AI is just going to facilitate all that. It's just going to facilitate that environment, like I said, it's already, coming to a place to where it's, when you get on Chat GPT, I've yet to meet anybody, no matter what their personality is, that says, you know what, I don't like how snarky Chat GPT is.
Yeah.
I don't like that. It seems like the programmers were so narcissistic. You don't hear any of that, which is usually the first level of judgment,
Yeah.
that everybody has. They get a new job. Am I working for a narcissist? That's my first question. Is he a narcissist? And that's, I don't want to work for a narcissist, God forbid that a narcissist would work for a narcissist. But anyway, that's so that whole idea of the Bible, is really, that the lovers of pleasure and looking for their own teachers, heaping to themselves teachers, having itching ears, they want to hear what they want to hear. AI is going to fit that role perfectly. It's going to facilitate that. And I think what all that's going to lead to is it's going to lead to a group think society. It's going to be, it's going to go like this. There's going to be like the handful of people who are seeing what's going on, and they're not going to play by the rules. But I think the base is just going to continue to grow. And then you're just going to have all these people. Like now, you have these people that are violent Republicans and violent Democrats, willing to go hand to hand, fighting against each other, because they're right, and anybody who, any sensible person would look at something like that and go, you do realize that you're fighting somebody else's battle, right? That has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
You're winning the war for somebody who's looking to control you, and you can't see that. It's just silly. But so I honestly, I think AI is just going to be a perfect tool, addition to the already built machinery that's going to lead us into the last days. And so, which in some ways for me is very, very exciting. Like when the whole credit card thing and the idea of a cashless society became a possibility, I was excited about that. It wasn't a thing where I'm looking at this going, oh no, the Bible's real. I looked at it, and I thought, wow, this is cool, man. We're getting close to the time when this is all going to wrap up and it's all going to be over. And I think, more and more people are accepting, even non-believers are accepting the idea that this planet is not going to survive forever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. Is the whole idea. I think, the intelligent people are finally waking up to the idea that, the Earth may have a sell-by date, And for me, that's just more exciting stuff, because that sell-by date is when Jesus returns, And so all of these things that people for many, many years were like, oh, please, oh, you stupid Christians, you're so naive. Now all of a sudden we're not naive anymore. It's just, oh, you've got your Christianity thing was ridiculous, but science proves this as well, and so it's like, yeah, okay, well, science finally came around to agree with the Bible. That's wonderful. I'm glad for that. And, but you're missing the important element, which is that the Bible already was moving in that direction thousands of years ago.
The question here, this is going kind of back to technology, but might be off topic. Let's say we're at the latter half. Here,
okay.
So you can pitch in. Any other questions? Welcome in. Might be off topic, but you recognize social media as a waste of time, and that it's taken away from human interaction. What do you think about texting?
Well, I all of that, all the not all technology, but there's no, I'm lost of a word to quantify, because it's not all technology, but it does cover some ground. I think anything associated with a phone is probably it is a waste of a lot of time. Texting is very convenient, and I like the idea, but as a supplement, not as a replacement. I like the idea. I have there's a few people in the world still, and they're usually old people like me, that I'll send them a text and then they'll call me. And they'll say, I can't be bothered sending you a text. I'll just call you and talk to you about it. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I'd really like to do that. But the thing is that because the generation is now that, why are you calling me? You could have just texted me. We're at that place that the idea of calling somebody and actually talking to them on the phone. So usually I'll text somebody and say, hey, are you busy? I got a few minutes. I just need to talk to you about something. And then I'll call them, if they're not busy, but there's a lot of, it's not, it's, what to say, really, what to say. I thought texting was really cool when it first came out. I was really into it because I'm into technology. I like technology. But when technology becomes a toy, that's when I'm not really a big fan of technology anymore, when it's reduced to a toy.
Define that. Define a toy.
When a person that knows nothing, absolutely nothing about the technology can use it with some measure of excitement and pleasure, then it's become a toy. Mm. Because they don't even know what's going on. They don't know the dynamics behind it. And so it's like, and it's like, you have to have
it
know
for
that
entertainment or
well,
like what?
Okay. The idea of flight, for example, using the joke of the not CY O'Connor, the other guy, I can't remember his name.
Yes, I know who you're talking about.
But anyway, the technology, we do have, you don't need to know how flight works. You don't need to know the principles of physics and stuff like that to get on a plane and use it as a tool. I'm not talking about that. But what I am talking about is when it literally becomes something that you have no idea what it is whatsoever, but you use it on a regular daily basis. You don't even care how it works. You're not even the least bit interested in it. And you're doing it because you derive pleasure from it. That's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. So because flying isn't really pleasurable, and that is part of the joke, is that it's not pleasurable. It would be, it would be nice if we could just, beam out and beam in somewhere, be much more desirable. But, but so like with texting is a thing of, are you texting because I mean, like I know people that they text because they want to avoid conversation. It's like, I don't understand that. Why? I literally, I know people that face to face, they won't dare say the things that they'll say on a text, and then they say things on a text and it's like, you don't realize this is two-dimensional. It's number one, it's lost a dimension already, because it's two-dimensional. Number two, I can't see your facial expressions. I can't tell if you're joking or if you're serious, and so I'll read your words and I'll think, oh, this person's really upset until I see the LOL. It's like, until that point, it's like, man, they're really upset, but also there is, like I said, I've had, that's why I don't do text counseling. People, can I talk to you about something? Yeah, I'll be at church at this time and we can talk. Okay. And then they don't, they won't, because they want to have a text conversation. And the reason is because they want to be able to say things that are socially unacceptable, but get away with it, because when they see you, they'll just go, I didn't really mean that.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, the things, and this has happened several times, and that's become noticeable to me, is that horrible things can be said in texts, or horrible things can be said, and then a text will be sent. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. And it's like, you're sending me a text? So usually I just text back thanks, because I know I'm not going to get anywhere. There's no point trying to deal with this. I'll just open the same conversation again. And but when you become socially incapable, then something's wrong. And I see that as in texting. I think texting makes people socially actually, it's not so much texting makes you like that. It's all part of the whole, that kind of technology, that antisocial technology.
Yeah.
That anything that puts a distance between you and the person, using a telephone was like, oh man, using a telephone, for crying out loud, and now you can't see the person, and it's like, yeah, but you can talk to the person who's in another country. So that brings them closer. So there is those benefits, is that things can bring you closer. And the benefits of texting, texting, you don't have to respond right away. Somebody sends you a text and you know what the issue is, and so you can, deal with it as you see fit from the text. You don't. So if you don't have time right then, to be interrupted with a phone call, but are we really that busy? That we can't be
yes,
interrupted by a phone
absolutely. I love texting.
Yeah, see, this is the thing I think is funny.
Okay,
but this is the thing I think is funny is that there's so much irony in this, is because often people are texting during the busiest moments of their day.
Yeah.
They can stop everything
true.
to send a text.
Yeah.
But the reason is because they're usually stealing time from something else.
Yeah.
They should be doing something else, but nobody will know if they're just on their phone texting.
Yeah.
But how's mom? Yeah. Your texting is like, it might be company related.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So-
true actually. Yeah. Well, when I first started texting, I was working in the trades and I got railed for texting all the time.
Yeah.
It was like a new thing, and I'm
Yeah.
texting. At
Yeah.
the time, I'm texting Clarissa or whatever,
Yeah.
and we're dating. But yeah, I got
and that's-
railed for it.
Yeah,
because
and-
stop texting on the job. Stay off your phone.
Yeah.
I'd get that all the time.
Well,
now,
yeah.
you can't even touch somebody for getting on their phone.
No, because they're addicted. It's
Yeah.
like it's like somebody who has autism, and telling them, why do you act that way?
Yeah.
It's the same idea. I act this way because I've got a phone. Okay, that's what you do with a phone. You get addicted to it. Well, not everybody, but it's an acceptable addiction for many people. And being on the phone 7 hours a day, I don't see any problem with it. I don't see anything wrong with that. It's like, okay, fine. You sleep for 6 or 7 hours. You're on your phone for 6 or 7 hours. You've just used half of your day, and now you've just only have half left.
I don't know if this is a question. A statement came up. I get praise and adoration from my partner in text, and she seems so happy. And in real life, it's crickets or negative communication. Rather, her being happy to me instead of in text. Oh, man.
Oh, yes. That is why I don't like social media. Right there. Even in a relationship, an intimate relationship, you still lie over distant forms of communication, like texting. Are you missing something here?
Keep going. Apparently, there's a question that didn't come through.
Oh, okay. And so the idea of that's proving it does prove my point, because that's not a singular event. I've heard that a lot. Is that, and we know this a lot. I know people. Which is another reason why I don't use social media, because social media would be just more information in my mind of how hypocritical people can be. Because we put our best foot forward on social media, and then in real life you're nothing like that, but you believe you are because you are on social media like that, and you think, oh, all my friends on social media think I'm wonderful. Exactly.
Okay. Sorry. It looks like maybe a question was asked but didn't actually come through on the chat. So I'm trying to get this individual to text it. Okay, here we go. Yeah, those didn't come through at all. Okay, studies have shown that regular screen interactions are bad for the development of a kid's brain, yet we as parents do everything on our phone, laptop. How do we not appear as hypocrites on this to our kids? Follow-up question. Oh, so I'll ask that, and then there's a follow-up question.
How do we appear as hypocrites? I've got an answer. It's probably not the answer you're looking for, but how about if you stop? Just a thought. Just stop doing everything on your phone and your computer and everything else. Learn how to put your phone away. You don't have to have your phone at dinner, or meals, or when you're out, or when you're talking to your kids.
Yeah.
Having these things involved in your life, like, so I have a rule in when my grandkids come to play, they always want phones to play phones, and I don't give them. They have to use Legos. It's just like, when my kids were younger, I didn't, buy, you know, 45 Magnum guns. Say, here you go. You need a gun. I know you need a gun because you guys like to play guns. No, you're going to have to use Legos to play guns.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to cater to that idea or that thinking that when I get to be an adult, I want to be on my phone all the time. I don't want that to be how they think. And so I'm not on my phone all the time. Like when I'm at church, I will use my phone when I'm not talking to other people. But when I'm talking to other people, I'm not using my phone. I'm not there going, yeah, okay, just a sec.
No.
Yeah.
This is what you do. You go, huh? Just a sec.
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do.
I've known you for a while. It's happened a few times.
Yeah, but I don't do them both at the same
I'm-
time. There's not.
Yeah.
There's not. People blowing up your phone. You tell them stop. Okay. All right. What were we talking about?
Okay. Follow-up question. Just by the way, I know we can't see this in the chat, but I'm loving the you can tell the person asking this question texts a lot because the hour is R and 1 is the number 1.
Well, why
I'm
are they? I wonder
loving
why
this.
they're not
I have no
showing
idea
up.
why they're not showing up here, but I've got.
Because we're getting some text.
Yeah, no, we're getting everything actually. And she sent a screenshot, so I've got this through text. I'm just gonna read them off anyway. But
What, did you just miss it? Is it on there? But you
it's
missed
not
it?
on there.
Oh,
No,
well,
I
that's
don't
what
have
I'm
it on
saying.
my side as well. Yeah, it's not on the chat,
Why
but it's
not?
on her side. So, but follow-up question: this world is run by technology. How do we teach our kids the importance of reading, writing, when one day they can just Google their questions, or may only pick up a pen to sign their name?
So I don't know who wrote this. I'm going to hurt you right now, but it's in love. Okay. You're talking to a guy who has had a computer since 1975. Okay. Since 1975. That was 6 years before I had kids. And I've had a computer ever since. And I have been a developer, a hacker, a technician, an engineer. I've been in the field of computer technology from the majority of that time. When we were in England, every one of us had a computer. In our front room was a network of computers. We were all on the computers, every one of us. My kids used to chat with people in America, their friends in America. That's how they communicated with their friends in America, because long distance phone calls at the time were super expensive. They were like something like 10 cents a minute or something like that. And it was super, super expensive to talk. And then all of a sudden the AOL chat came out, and they could use, or MSN, and
Wow, it's been a while since I've thought about that.
yeah, and we played networked video games, LAN video games together. My son cut his teeth on video games, and the reason I'm sharing all this to you is that all of my kids read. Now, why do you think that is? Why do they read? I'll tell you why they read. Is because we showed them that reading is fun, and we read. We can play games, we can do different things, but we also know stuff. We also read. They saw me read. My wife used to read books out loud. She used to take them to the library and get books and sit down and read with them and read the books out loud to them. And they would always want me to read books out loud, but I really enjoyed when my wife would read books out loud. So I would say, no, let mom do that, so I could listen. I was one of the kids. I love the stories. We're all kinds of stories and stuff of just listening to reading and stuff like that. So you have to read with your kids, or your kids have to see you reading. They have to see that you're interested in reading. You can't expect your kids to do anything you're not doing. And so it really doesn't matter what kind of an environment they're in. What really matters is, it is environmental, but whatever the world environment that they're in is, what really matters is what's the more intimate environment with their parents. That's really the issue more than anything else. If you don't have an intimate environment with your kids, if you've been disconnected from your kids have gotten up to their sort of teenage years and they've disconnected from you, that you need to work on reconnecting that. You need to do everything you can to reconnect that before it's too late, because you won't be able to teach them a thing if they're disconnected from you. If they think you are the older you are old, from the standpoint of you're no longer relevant in their lives, it doesn't matter anyway. You're not going to show them anything, but you're going to have to make some connections, and that's where you're going to make it. You're going to make connections with reading with them. Like I said, my wife, read with the kids as well, and she's reading with our grandkids. She'll sit down and read with our grandkids, and so that having that environment, is very critical. It's very important.
Your comment about 6 years, I think, before you had any kids.
Yeah.
Brittany, your daughter, said 10 years before you had kids. No wonder you think your kids are in their 40s.
I was 15 when I got a computer. Okay. I had my first kid at 21, maybe 22. Well, let me see, August. Yeah. So I had just turned 22. So 7 years.
Okay.
My kids, I say the 40s simply because you're in your late 30s. And I love how upset people get when they're in their 30s and they get upset because they're almost 40. And I do it on purpose.
I have absolutely no care in the world about how old I am, but I love the fact that my wife is older than me. I look, because she's the same. Yeah, actually, my wife is your kid, so it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and she's 39.
So. I know, she's 40.
So she's 40. Yeah. I mean, I was telling people that I was 60 years old when I was 58. Because I just got tired of saying 58. It's like parents. How old's your kid? 17 months? You see, how old is that? 17 months. Let me see. So 12, and then 5 months.
It's yes.
It's like, why 17 months? Why don't you say, almost 2 years old?
Yeah.
What's another couple of months?
I've heard people say their kids are in 30 plus months. It's like almost 3 years, man. Come on.
I mean, it is, granted, it is easier to say, but just forget about it. Just start doing everything in years. We only have a birthday every year. We don't have birthdays every month.
So to sum this all up, it really does come down to the individual, doesn't it?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
I mean, the danger of technology, AI.
Well, everything in life comes down to the individual all the time, how you were, because the issue is not what happens to you. The issue is how you respond to what happens to you. Yeah. And that's always the case. When you learn how to respond properly to things, you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. It's not a big problem. It's not, I should try to, golly, man, bang, half an hour just disappeared. Okay. Too late.
Actually covered quite a bit of ground.
But anyway, because the last bits that I wanted to talk about is the bottom line is that Jesus is coming back, and he's coming back before things get really, 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 really bad. What that means exactly, I don't know, because I thought really, really bad had already happened. But I'm getting used to things as they go along. But the bottom line is there's going to come a point where, Jesus is going to come back and he's going to take his church away. And then those who are left behind, they're the ones who are going to have to deal with all this. And so that's the real problem, is that, what the real dark side of everything, isn't going to happen until after. I mean, there's going to be the rumblings and all that. We're going to see all those things sort of coming into play, but there isn't going to be a time where, like you said, we're going to be on the brink of total destruction of everybody, and thinking, what's going to happen? I don't know. No, we're going to be gone. Jesus is going to come back, and because before that time, he's coming back, and we know there's going to be at least 7 years of really bad crap going on, called the tribulation, and then we're going to have the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ, and so for anybody from that 1,007 years. Throughout that, they've made bad choices. They've made some terrible choices about things, and so I think that's a much more important thing to be thinking about than to get distracted by technology and the various things that are going on in our world in general. You know, that it's not really necessary. I don't think, you know, I'm not Amish, but I think that Amish have a great philosophy for life. Um, the two neighbors were living together. One guy was a Amish, and the other. It's a joke that he says to him. He says, you know, how do you do it? I'm having such a hard time making ends meet and everything, you know, and I'm working and I'm making money and stuff like that. And you guys just seem to everything just seems to be fine and this and that. And he says, well, I'll tell you what. He says, let's do this. He says, then when you get to a place to where you just absolutely can't afford to live the way that you're living, you come and see me and I'll show you how to live without those things. And that's really is what it comes down to, you know, is that we how do you make it? How do you survive? Well, I don't need all this garbage that you have. You know, I don't need all these things. I don't need to be involved. I don't need to have my fingers in all these pies, you know, of the world. I know technology. I know what's going on in the world. I know, but I'm not plugged into it, you know. And that's the best place to be, you know. Be aware of it, you know. Don't be the ostrich with your head poked into the sand. But at the same time, you don't have to know everything that's going on and be all anxious and afraid of what the future is going to hold.
Yeah.
So I will have to leave it at that because it's 8:30.
Okay, this last question came in.
Oh, you want to keep going?
Well, you can just. I think it's kind of an easy yes or no.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Do you think that in those 1,000 years we'll be using our giftings that we are experiencing now?
Oh, interesting question. Yeah, interesting question.
Maybe we'll do another podcast on the tribulation.
Oh, yeah, we could do.
The return.
We could.
The return of Jesus. The end of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
I've
actually been thinking quite a bit about that.
Life. What's the second part? Life, the universe, and everything.
Is this another Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing?
All right.
All right. That's it. Catch us tomorrow night. We'll be here live. We encourage you to come join us. As a matter of fact, we'd love it if you came and joined us tomorrow night. 7 o'clock service starts. We open the doors an hour early. We come and pray, and you are welcome to come and meet us in person. We'd love to have you here, and obviously check us out more on YouTube. We have all our past podcasts are there, past sermons. Feel free to check all that out. We're here to be a help for you, and so we'd love it if you throw your comments in, throw your questions in. If you have questions after the fact, you're watching this and it's not live, you can feel free to throw questions in the comment section, and we'll get back to you on those. So we'll see everybody next week.